assessment and management. Cumulative impact assessment and management. So the major environmental and social management challenges that we face today are very enormous. In fact, let me start to use the word before we even define the word. They are cumulative in nature. We have diverse challenges ranging from climate change issues, loss of biodiversity, the decline of ocean fisheries, limitations on food security, scarcity of freshwater resources, displacement of communities with consequent increases in urban poverty, and of course, rural poverty, and inviability of traditional local livelihoods. These are enormous challenges that we are faced with, and all of these are the result of cumulative impact from a large number of activities that are, for the most part, individually significant, but together they have had regional or even global consequences or repercussions. So the importance of understanding cumulative environmental and social impacts from multiple projects, actions, or activities, or even from the same projects over an extended period of time, located in the same geographical region or affecting the same resources, have been acknowledged for decades. So in some cases, the most ecologically devastating environmental effects and subsequent social consequences may result from the direct effect of a particular action or project or an activity, but from the combination of existing stresses and the individually minor effects of multiple actions over time. Okay, so we will dive in straight to the webinar overview for today. But basically, I want us to know that cumulative impacts encompasses a broad spectrum of impact. It's different in a way from the environmental assessment we have been capturing in most of our modules, and social impact assessment that we have captured, and health impact assessment. Now we're looking at the cumulative impact, the broad spectrum of all of the impacts. Because in some cases, cumulative impacts occur because a series of projects of the same type are being developed, or a series of projects of different types are being developed. Imagine that you have a mining site and you have a power plant located maybe in the same environment, and also you have the transmission lines or the roads that have to be built. All of those different projects are having cumulative impacts on the environment. And of course, you know that the environment has its carrying capacity. So all of this we are going to be checking in the course of this webinar. Okay, so we'll look at what it is. We'll look at the assessment and management of it. Other ones, conditions should cumulative impacts be conducted. What are the expected outcomes of cumulative impact assessment? How does CIA compare with other environmental and social risk assessment management tools? All of this comparison we are going to be taking in different modules. We have about 6 to 8 modules to capture on cumulative impact assessment. So I do hope that you will stick around until we capture all of this. And if you have questions, as usual, you can drop them down so that at the right time, we can look at them and answer them as fast as we can. So just in case we can't answer your questions, because I can see the questions are already rolling in, just send us an email. You can use this email, info@richflood.com, or you can send me an email directly, comfort@richflood.com, comfort@richflood.com. All right, so what are cumulative impacts? Cumulative impacts are those that result from the successive incremental and or combined effects of a project or an action or an activity or series of activities, in when added to their existing planned or reasonably anticipated future ones. If you have a mining, maybe you have a gold mine in a particular environment and it is operational, and there is, maybe in the same vein, lead, since gold and lead and zinc, can occur in the same vein according to the geologist, and you have maybe lead that could be mined in an adjacent field. This impact of each of the projects in this mining blocks can be what we call the cumulative impacts. So it could come in various forms. When the gold mine, since we're using that as an example, is contributing its impact on the environment and maybe even on the social lives of the people. And then the lead mine is doing the same. And then the columbite mine is doing the same. And then the barite mine is doing the same. All of these affects, ambient conditions, such as incremental contribution of pollutant emissions in an airshed. For instance, maybe you have a power plant and you have a refinery. These two projects in the same environment will have an impact on the pollutants in the air. The NOx, that's nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and volatile organic compounds. All of these contaminants or pollutants, as you like, will be emitted into the environment, and this constitutes cumulative impact. This is an example of cumulative impact. Another one is increases in pollutant concentration in a water body or in the soil or sediments or their bioaccumulation. If you have a coal-fired power plant and you have another project that has demand on the water body or have effluent discharges, this project cumulatively will stress the water body. That's what this point is trying to make. So there will be bioaccumulation, or the pollutant concentration in the water body will get to go up, and this constitutes cumulative impact. Okay, so reduction of water flow in a watershed due to multiple withdrawals is also a cumulative impact. Increases in sediment loads on a watershed or increased erosion is a cumulative impact. Interference with migratory routes of wildlife movement is another. Increased pressure on the carrying capacity or the survival of indicator species in an ecosystem. Wildlife population reduction caused by increased hunting, roadkills, and forestry operations. Depletion of forest as a result of multiple logging activities. Secondary or induced social impacts such as in-migration or more traffic congestion and accidents along community roadways owing to increases in transport activity in a project area of influence can be an example of cumulative impact as well. So multiple and successive environmental and social impacts from existing development combined with the potential incremental impacts resulting from proposed or anticipated future development may result in significant cumulative impact that will not be expected in the case of a standalone development. If it's just one project, it will be lesser. Many projects becomes a cumulative concern about the impact. Okay, so we move forward to explaining cumulative impact assessment and management. I will just take a brief explanation on this once so that we can have some space to take some questions. If you have, I can see some questions are being dropped. Just continue dropping them. We'll take one or two after this webinar session. So CIA is the process of analyzing the potential impacts the impacts that we have mentioned in the previous slides, the impacts we identified, the assessment of them, of the impact, is what we call the cumulative impact assessment. So analyzing the potential impact and risks of proposed development. It could be series of development in the context of the potential effects of other human activities and natural environment and social external drivers on the choosing valued environmental and social commitments. So we'll be using the terminology VEC. I should have added, yeah, you can see that defining threshold for VEC. So VEC is valued environmental and social components. Valued environmental and social components. So proposing concrete measures to avoid, reduce, or mitigate such impacts and risks to the extent possible is what we call the cumulative impact management. Okay, cumulative impact management is a way of proposing concrete measures to avoid, reduce, or mitigate such cumulative impact and risk to the extent that is possible. So the key analytical task is to discern how the potential impacts of a proposed development might combine or cumulatively with the potential impacts of the other human activities and other natural stressors such as droughts or extreme climate events. So VECs are immersed in a natural, ever-changing environment that affects their condition and resilience. So VECs are integrators of the stressors that affect them. For example, periodic extremes of participation like droughts or floods, temperature, extreme or cold, or fluctuations in predators all affect the condition of biological VECs. So today and into the future, global warming, climate change can be expected to have substantial impact on the condition of VECs. Okay, so excuse me for a minute. Anyway, so other human activities of greatest importance in cumulative impact assessment are those that will occur in the future, or if already existing, have ongoing influences on the environment already and will continue to have in the future, and are expected to interact with the same VECs in the future as does the development under pressure. So CIA represents an analytical complication, so to say, in environmental and social impact assessment, because the spatial horizon of impact assessment is usually greater than in normal project environmental and social impact assessment. In the Asia, you're considering a specific normal project and the impact of such project on the environment, while in CIA, you are taking a broad spectrum of the impact of a number of projects on the environment or on the social parameters of communities. So VECs, which are valued environmental and social components, are serious considerations when it comes to CIAs. So because CIAs are complex and they are it has cost and time and money considerations, So for a CIA to be effective in supporting good overall environmental and risk management, its scope must be properly defined from the beginning, from the onset. We capture the scoping, screening, all of those procedural guidelines for an environmental and social impact assessment, right? So in this case as well, we are going to be having some of those procedures followed in the case of CIAs as well. So the scope of the CIA has to be properly prepared in a realistic fashion so that it can form the basis for the study and the extent to which the study is going to be conducted, because it is unrealistic to think that every environmental and social aspect that can be subject to cumulative impact can be appropriately factored into a CIA. It is good to practice to focus the assessment and management strategies on the VECs. better to focus it on the VEX. And what is VEX? VEX is valued environmental and social components in a particular project location. So it is also, VEX are also environmental attributes that are considered to be important in assessing risks. They may be physical features, they may be ecosystem services, okay? It may be natural processes, water and nutrient cycles. These are VEX. These are VEX, valued environmental and social components. It may be cultural aspects as well, and social conditions, just like the SC, S, maybe it should have been with an S there, I don't know, but valued environmental and social components. The S is missing, but the social conditions such as health and economics are also very important when you're defining VEX. Okay, and while VEX may be directly or indirectly affected by a specific development, they often are also affected by the cumulative effects of several developments. So VEX are the ultimate recipients of impacts because they tend to be at the ends of ecological pathways throughout the project's life cycle. Okay, so the identification and assessment, the identification of specific assessments and the endpoints is a critical step in any risk assessment, like we know. So to guide subsequent analysis, the identification of endpoints needs to be initiated during the scoping phase. We are going to treat this in upcoming webinar, okay, through social and ecological scoping as well. Social scoping through participatory, we dealt with stakeholder engagement and social engagements in the previous webinar. You can subscribe to our webinar channel so that maybe on YouTube is best, so that you can have updates of all of the webinars that we do, and always follow so that we can be on the same platform of understanding the concept, because most of these terminologies have been dealt with in previous webinars. Okay, so during the scoping exercise, ecological scoping is also very useful because it's used to identify how impacts can be studied and predicted. So VEX should reflect public concern about social, cultural, economical, aesthetic values, and also the scientific concerns of the professional community. It is important that VEX build from existing definitions of valuable environmental and social components prescribed in local laws or performance standards of the IFC. It is important that VEX build from existing definition to non-existing definitions, as you may wish. So how does VEX influence the CIA process? How do VEX, influence the CIA process? CIA is inherently future-oriented, actually. So the concern for assessment of cumulative impacts is driven by the need to understand the conditions of VEX that are expected to result from the combination of development impacts and natural forces. So for instance, to what extent will a terrestrial habitat be fragmented beyond its ecological functionality by the cumulative impacts of multiple linear infrastructure developments? So good CIA focuses on understanding whether cumulative impacts will affect the sustainability or viability of the VEC, as indicated by the predicted condition of the VEC, or subsequently, the significance of cumulative impacts is judged in the context of threshold or limits of acceptable change, within which the VEC condition is considered to be acceptable, but beyond which further change in condition is not acceptable. So if such thresholds are not established, the significance of cumulative impact cannot be determined. There must be a threshold. There must be a threshold. Okay, so how then do we describe thresholds for VEX? how do we describe thresholds for VEX? Defining thresholds for VEX. The viability of sustainability of VEX, whether ecological, biological, or related to human communities, is their capacity to endure. That is, for the ecosystem, the community, or the population to remain diverse and productive over time. This is reflected in the definition of sustainable use in the Convention on Biodiversity, biological diversity, using the components of biological diversity in a way and at a rate that does not lead to the long-term decline of biological diversity. Okay, so thereby maintaining its potential to meet the needs and aspiration of future generation, like in the sustainable development definition. So the viability of sustainability of VEX depends upon both the forces that affect them and their social and ecological vulnerability. That's their sensitivity. That is the degree to which they are susceptible to and unable to cope with injury, damage, or harm. So defining thresholds of acceptable VEX condition involves social and ecological scoping informed by scientific understanding. In setting them, one considers points at which there is an abrupt change in a VEX condition, where small changes in a given environment or social driver produces large response in the condition of the VEX. So ecological thresholds for physical VEX, such as air, water, and soil quality, are often readily viable in either government established ambient quality standards or in international scientific literature. So thresholds may in some cases be determined from performance standards of the IFC, so on. So what is the objectives of cumulative impact assessment? We have basically 4 objectives of cumulative impact assessment that we are going to capture on this module. So one is to assess the potential impact and risks of the proposed development over time in the context of potential effects from other developments and natural, environmental, and social external drivers on the choosing VEC. Okay, so number 2 objectives is to verify that the proposed development's cumulative social and environmental impact and risks will not exceed a threshold that could compromise the sustainability or viability of selected VECs in that environment. Number 3 objective of CIA is to confirm that the proposed development value and feasibility are not limited by cumulative social and environmental effects. Number 4 of the objective is to support the development of governance structure for making decisions and managing cumulative impacts at the appropriate geographic scale, such as maybe regional landscape. So there are other objectives that we could talk about, which is related to affected communities, because proposed projects can affect communities when it is in a cumulative format, when the impact is in a cumulative format. So that such is also considered an objective. Another one which could also be considered as an objective is to manage potential reputational risk, because assessment of cumulative impact should employ information from a variety of instruments. So there are a number of objectives that we could go on and on and on to identify in the process for cumulative impact assessment, but this few is what we will be looking at. So okay, let's take a question. Maybe a question will do, because we are ending the webinar now. My email is comfort@richflood.com, comfort@richflood.com, or you could send to info at richflood.com. So we'll take the questions now, and I can see a question from Leonard. Okay. Leonard says, in my area, oh, this is quite long. Okay, I think what Leonard is trying to say